A lot of libertarians are frustrated right now, and for good reason. The world is a complicated place, and the old answers, they just don't seem to cut it anymore. And the mainstream media, like always, is not helping out. Tom Luongo, my guest today, he's been piecing together a different framework, one that puts the city of London, Iran, and Trump into a context that I think makes pretty good sense. And today we're going to dig into it. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Finding Freedom here on the Lions of Liberty Network. Great to have you with me. I want to get to my guest real quick, but first, sponsor for today's show, my guest 2 weeks ago, Jason Gagne and the Good to Go Body Program. If you've been struggling with your fitness and workouts and you've tried different things and failed, check out this program. It works from the ground up like a baby learning how to walk, building that strong foundation, building strength so you can actually get stronger and do more intense workout programs rather than throwing yourself into the fire, getting hurt, and quitting. Just click the link on YouTube, wherever you're watching or wherever you're listening on your favorite podcast platform. It's down there in the description. Check it out, save $100, and get in shape. All right, let's bring in my guest for today, Tom Luongo. Tom is a independent analyst. He's a host of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. He's known for his unflinching analysis of geopolitics, financial power, political philosophy, and also posting some mean tweets on X, which I love. But he publishes at tomluongo.me, and he's a provocative voice in the current political climate. And happy to have him on the show. Tom, welcome to Finding Freedom.
Good afternoon, John. How are you? Sorry we had a little bit of a hiccup to get started today, but do appreciate the invite, and let's rock and roll.
Yeah, happy to have you here and smoking your token cigar as always. Love to see
have
that.
to.
How many cigars do you go through a day?
Oh, it depends on the day. Let's just leave it. It depends on the day. It depends on how angry I am, how bored I am, and so I guess it all depends. Probably at least too many. Let's just put it that way.
That's fair. Well, before we dive into things, just to kind of tee up the conversation here. I mean, my audience knows me, obviously, and they know that I've kind of evolved over the past couple years, and maybe surprised some of them, and some of them probably left and probably attracted some new people. But that's what podcasting's all about. So most of my audience probably comes from that Ron Paul movement, like myself, and pretty well aligned with the Dave Smith and Tom Woods of the world. And yeah, I still am in many ways. A lot of ways, not so much anymore. Really, for me, something shifted prior to 2024, but I voted for Trump for the first time in 2024. I'd grown sick of the LP and their leftward nonsense, but really, after reflecting on that, I think it wasn't so much the LP; it was myself kind of shifting away and starting to really understand that this libertarian, to kind of use Tom Woods' thing against him, the libertarian index card of allowable opinions didn't really align with the real world. What I was seeing.
I like that. I do like that.
Yeah. Nothing against Tom. He's a nice guy, I'm sure. But just seeing what's happened over the years. I mean, and libertarians know this. I mean, we've seen, the elitists, the Davos crowd influence our politics down to the local level. We've seen our industry collapse in this country. We've seen wealth extracted from this country. And the response from libertarians is, well, let's not intervene anywhere. let's just stay here and just don't intervene. There's nothing we can do. So,
Yeah, it's learned helplessness is not a good political strategy, and that's the biggest problem. I think there's many things. For me, my evolution has been, the minute I started to realize that we were about to get tightening, central bank tightening on steroids,
mhm,
after COVID, and I realized that COVID, and I started to do a refit, a reimagining, a rethinking of all the history that I thought I knew and all the events that I'd lived through and I thought I understood. It became obvious to me that the minute Jerome Powell began stealth tightening in the middle of 2021 and the entire world lost their mind. And I mean,
mhm.
at all the usual suspects that I would normally go, hey, look, they're the bad guys, right? My dog agrees with me, by the way. And when I saw them all crash out at the same time. So when I saw Christine Lagarde get angry with him for not saying I'm going to coordinate monetary policy to support climate change, when I saw him drain over $2 trillion worth of global M0 from the Eurodollar markets in 3 months, and I watched Obama and company, because the Biden junta was not really the Biden administration, was clearly just Obama's third term, try to get rid of him through a ham-fisted insider trading scandal that got the only 3 other hawks on the Federal Reserve Board hand, and they fought his reappointment to a second term,
Mhm.
like in ways that the only person they fought harder than Powell for 2 years than Donald Trump, right? And when I watched all that, I'm like, and I started watching the process, I'm like, well, the Federal Reserve is just an institution. And even in the early days of it, I could make the argument to myself, well, institutions defend themselves. First rule of an organization is, is
Mhm.
self-preservation, right? So I get it. I'm still in the Butler Schaefer, I just trust all human organizations larger than a two-handed game of poker. Like, I get it. I'm still there. I mean, part of me is still there. But the thing is that I also realize that organizations and institutions, when under a ridiculous amount of stress, have the opportunity to shift their focus and shift their gears, because they bow to real political pressure as well. They bow to the people's pressure. They bow to the law of diminishing marginal utility. If you really want to get into it, at the end of the day, they're further corrupting the money supply doesn't um, doesn't further the Fed's ends of being the sole monopoly issuer of new monetary units in the United States economy,
Mhm.
right? Or the global economy. So therefore, at some point, they're going to turn around and do what needs to be done. And what I found really fascinating was that the minute we started getting a Federal Reserve chairman acting like he would as if he had been an Austrian, which is to, you know, go through the most ridiculously fast rate hike cycle in the history of the Federal Reserve,
Mhm.
out Volcker, and they're all crashing out and complaining. Like they're all doing the same thing. I'm watching, all the libertarians, the Rudy Havensteins, like all these people I consider my friends. Like I was sitting there like, what are you doing? Like Powell's doing what you ask him to do. And now you can't roll with the punches and say, okay, I thought the whole model was supposed to be reward them when they do good
Mhm.
and lambaste them when they do bad. But no, it's always got to be the same. It's always the same process. So then at that point, I realized, like, I started really changing my tune. I went from doing, I don't really want to like defend the Fed here or anything, but to making memes about Powell, you know, as Don Corleone stroking a cat. Like within a year, I'm like, I love this guy. And I get it, and because I got what he was doing. Because then, when you tied that to the shift over from LIBOR to SOFR, when you started looking at everything that happened, I started looking at COVID as one big get Trump and get Powell operation, along with everything else. But the
Mhm.
major the major focus of this was, you know, make sure that you could justify stealing the election from Donald Trump in November of 2020 and force Powell back to the zero bound, and then saddle him with $11 trillion worth of spending that he would have to monetize at the zero bound in perpetuity. Because that was literally 2021 was the last attempted coup against the United States. The last one previous to that, which was successful, was 2008. The one previous to that was Bretton Woods. The one previous to that was, 1913. Right? Like,
And
we can keep going.
Yeah, when you say coup, just so people are understanding what you're saying, who is running the coup against the United States?
Obviously, the same people that are still butthurt about losing the War of Independence, the British, the old British, the old Anglo-Dutch. You want to get old Ian Burlingame on you. The old Anglo-Dutch system.
Yeah. He was on a couple of weeks ago. Yeah,
Ian's a good guy, and that's why I invoked him, because I know that there's different. We have slight differences of opinion about how to market this whole thing, right? But really, at the end of the day, we don't disagree. It's just marketing at this point to try and explain it to people in different ways. But look, the British Empire never died. It just went into remission. It just went behind the scenes. The offshore dollar system is the modern incarnation of what's left of the British Empire, which is also what's left over of the Dutch, East Indies Company, which is also a leftover of a holdover of Venice and this and that. We can keep going back through time. Yada, 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 all the way back to Rome if we want. It's fine. I don't care about any of that anymore. I'm not here. I'm not a historian at the end of the day. There are better historians out there than me. I don't give a shit when it comes to this stuff. I'm fighting these people today because where the metaphoric heart of that system is currently centered in the city of London, the Vatican, obviously Washington, D.C.
Yeah. I think it is important to at least in those of us who are aligned on who the people are, to kind of come to a consensus on what are we going to call them, right?
Right.
Because otherwise, if we're using different terms, that could be very confusing.
The problem with that is, John, I'm the guy who I created the term the Davos crowd. I'm the one who's Alex Grainer and I created all roads lead to London. We did all this stuff, right? We created all the memes, we created all the ideas, right? The problem is the following: there are different factions. There's a very specific British faction, there's a very specific Dutch faction, there's a very specific French faction, there's a very specific Italian faction, yada, yada, yada. There's the EU, which is a different program than the British Empire. Okay. And you got to realize that, when you watch if you watch the Brexit stuff, the shit that's been going on with Brexit for the last decade, you realize that they agree on destroying the United States, Russia, and controlling China, or making a partner out of China, but by having political control over the CCP. But they disagree as to who should run the new version of the empire. The British still want to run things. They still hate the French. The French still hate the British. There's nothing new here. You have to remember, that they've been fighting wars longer. They've been fighting each other a hell of a lot longer than they've been fighting us.
There's nothing new under the sun.
No, there really isn't. So from that perspective, this is why I use the term Davos sometimes to describe one agenda, and I describe the British system to describe another agenda. When I use the all roads lead to London thing, I'm really talking about the financial markets. And when I'm talking about the greater political agenda, or call it Agenda 2030 or the World Economic Forum or whatever you want to call it, I also like to talk the whole thing as the high table, which is the web of organized crime and government and the whole thing. To me, I'm at the point now where John Wick is a documentary. It really is. And so, and Donald Trump gets to be John Wick in this scenario. And so and Vladimir Putin gets to be, I don't know, whatever. What's the guy who runs the Continental? I can't remember his name now. He gets to be him, and you can just different seats at the high table, right? Putin gets to be Angelica Houston running the Russian part of it, right? Not that that's an image that I want to put in anybody's head or anything. I'm real sorry about that, but it's almost as bad as saying that Angela Merkel dresses up like a cheerleader and saying don't fight over me, boys. But the point being is that I am talking about London. I really am talking about the financial system, right? Just to make sure, because that's where most of the money flows through. It flows through that and the offshore banking establishments all through the Caribbean, and some of which were in, like places like Abu Dhabi and Singapore and Hong Kong and Vancouver and blah, 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 right? And some of those outposts are still in New York City. Some of those outposts are no longer in New York City, and that's where the fight is really, really interesting. And that's hard for people to wrap their brains around. I get it, because it's not the thing you're ever told. But one of the things that's really, and so when you take all that together, right? And then when you go back to why I'm no longer, technically why I'm no longer a libertarian, be it small L or large L. I haven't been a large L libertarian since I left the party in 2004, by the way, is because, there's a big hole in all of their analysis. I don't care if you're talking Tom Woods. I don't care if you're talking Ron Paul. I don't care if you're talking Lou Rockwell, whom I adore, or any of them. None of them, ever blame London for anything. London's role in any of this stuff, never an issue.
Do you think that's
it's always America's fault? It's always America's fault. Always.
Do you think that that's an oversight, or is there something else there?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave that to the audience to decide, especially a libertarian audience. I'm bringing this up in order to get people to think, to get outside of their regular box. I don't want to have an opinion on that.
Yeah.
Okay. I would rather not have an opinion on any of that. I don't want to think ill of Ron Paul. I don't want to think ill of these people. I don't. Right. But I went to the Mises Institute in October 2024, and I tried to, mildly criticize them to update their model a little bit to go help the administration fight the real war. And they called me a clown. And they wouldn't put the speech out. And they wouldn't, and they took the microphone away from me. And their entire room was ready to, we were all sitting there, like people lining up at the microphone to do a Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
And they took the microphone away from me and shunted me off the stage like I was, like I farted in church or something, which I did. And Tom Woods was just right there in the front row, shrinking, making himself even smaller. And Tom Woods, can't get much smaller. He's only 5'2". So and I'm like, really? And I thought I was, I'll be honest with you. I mean, you know how abrasive I can be. I thought I was at my most charming. I thought I had the room. I did have the room, except for Joe Salerno and Tom DiLorenzo and a few others. And we're like, yeah, I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. And peer pressure is real. And everybody's running a grift. And I'm like, look, at the end of the day, if you want to be a fourth-rate book club, great. You want to be a discussion circle, great. Do you want to actually change the world? When there's an opportunity to change the world, it's not going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I invoked the Murray Rothbard. Never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Right?
Yeah,
let's go out and push the ball forward in the right direction. And I don't know. We can have a large discussion about all the things that Donald Trump has done that libertarians should be happy about, and none of which have anything to do with Rush Ulbricht.
Yeah, let's get into that. But I just to kind of piggyback on what you said, because libertarians are so quick to point out, when we look at the left media, the MSNBCs of the world, and we talk about the echo chambers that they're caught in and the groupthink, and it's you look at somebody who works at MSNBC that's an anchor. Well, it's not really their fault that they're an idiot. It's because that they've been brought up in this environment. They're surrounded by idiots. So they're just saying the same thing they're hearing. So it's hard to break out of that chamber, right? Well, the same thing is true within any movement, right? To a degree. So you have to have disruptors. Because like it or not, like the Mises Institute, it's been built in a way around certain principles. And when somebody comes in and challenges aspects of it, or says maybe we should be looking a slightly different direction, that threatens the foundation of what it was built upon, right? It threatens the foundation of the previous people who came through, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the thing about any organization and anything. I've said this many times, and I can like make a story about. I can spin you a yarn about Star Wars, for example. Like everybody who has crashed out about the Last Jedi, for example, for all the wrong reasons. There's many reasons to not like the Last Jedi. And I like the movie, but there's many reasons why people don't like it. But one of the things from a philosophical and from a structural perspective, what Rian Johnson did, people accuse Rian Johnson of hating Star Wars. No, Rian Johnson loved Star Wars so much he was going to try and break it and see if it's still held up. Right, thematically, as a story, as an ethos, or whatever it is that they built. His goal was to go in and challenge it to its core and see if Star Wars still stood up. And his estimation, I watched The Last Jedi. All I see is a resounding yes. Again, we can argue about whether he should have, we can argue about the structure of the screenplay and a variety of other things, the decisions that he made tonally and whatnot. Fine. I have no problem with that. But from a structural perspective, The Last Jedi was a challenge to the very basis and core of everything that Star Wars was in everyone's mind. And I think it still stands up. Like as a thing, as a story worth, pursuing into the future. Other people feel otherwise, but I looked at it that way. I believe the same thing. That's what I went into the Mises Institute with. I went into them like, if we're a serious organization with serious ideals, as serious people, we have a serious opportunity to go and fundamentally move the world in the direction that you say you want to go. It's time to put down your oppositional defiance disorder and submit a little bit and get with the program. And if you can't bring yourself to do that, well, then you're going to continue to be a fourth-rate book club. And I said, and I know where I probably crossed the line that night. And I said, seriously, and I'm just being honest here, folks. I said, look, we're 16 years. This is 16 years after the Ron Paul revolution began. And I was there at the beginning, and I emailed Lou Rockwell the day after Ron took out Rudy Giuliani. And I said, you better tell Ron that there's a whole lot of people coming his way, and he better beef up his organization tomorrow because he's now the rock star of U.S. politics. I remember emailing him literally the next morning after I watched that. And because I was, intermittently writing for LRC at the time. I had a couple of articles from that era. So I had Lou's email address, and I sent him an email. And here we are 16 years after the Ron Paul revolution began. And if we were a serious organization, there'd be 2,000 people in this room, not 200. Now, we should take that as criticism of we have done a lot of things right, and we've done some things wrong. So here's my blueprint for how you can go forward. And what we should be doing right now. We have a historic opportunity to fundamentally change the way our government operates, the way the Federal Reserve operates, and all these other things. And I intentionally kept I knew I had about an hour and 15 minutes total, so I intentionally cut my speech, my rhetoric down to about 45 to 50 minutes in order to leave enough room for Q&A, which I never got a chance to do, to explain in greater detail some of the things that I thought I was seeing. And it was very distressing. And it was also, unfortunately, it was also edifying because I knew at that point that okay, we're in two different worlds. Because I'm going to go forward with this because that's why I was attracted to this movement in the first place. This has got more explanatory power than everything else. So here we are at the moment when we have Kevin Warsh. Every Austrian should be out there today jumping up and down for joy that Kevin Warsh is the Federal Reserve chair. Why?
Yeah, why should they be?
Well, because Kevin Warsh went out at his first press conference, dramatic pause, and said two things that were very important. The first is, and this is the least interesting one, is no more forward guidance on interest rates coming from his office. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. Going back to Volcker, just going to do stuff. Right? Second thing, I am not, my friend Susan Kokind did a whole 15-minute video on this the other day. I am not going to make the cruel choice between inflation and unemployment. Meaning, the high shibboleth of the technocratic, disgusting thing that is Keynesian economics The whole purpose of Keynes's general theory was to justify technocracy in the form of monetary policy through the Phillips curve, the trade-off between employment and inflation. And Warsh went out there and said, nope, don't believe in the Phillips curve. That's it. He's not a Keynesian.
Yeah.
We're not going to, but here's the problem, because Austrians are just right-wing communists, or sorry, libertarians are just right-wing communists. There's communists that don't want to pay taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But their thinking is exactly the same. They're ideologically possessed, purity spiraling jackasses who smell. Ready? Happy? There we are. We're done.
I've been to Porkfest. It's
it's a little ripe. It's aptly named. Let's just put it that way. If you just change the C to a K. I kid. Mostly, I kid. I'm mostly again trying to just poke your sensibility. But let's. I know plenty of libertarians who shower, and wear pants even, and it's impressive. And I'm not one of those, mind you. But I do shower. I don't wear pants. But yeah, because I lived in Florida for most of my life. You don't wear pants.
You can't wear pants in Florida.
Exactly. So my point being is that we have these opportunities in front of us. Most libertarian thinking at this point has become ideologically possessed, purity spiraling. Like Bitcoin maxis are running into the same problem. Gold bugs have always had the same group of people. It's a left brain possession problem. Okay. And they should be cheering to the high heavens about Kevin Warsh finally repudiating the Phillips curve. Now, my friends over at Promethean Action, like former LaRouchites or whatever you want to call them, are jumping up and down about this. And I'm like, that's a good start. You're going to get rid of the Laffer curve as well. We're going to do, what else are we going to get rid of? I don't happen to fully believe in the whole Hamiltonian system of political economy. I'm not a huge fan of all of it. For years, I used to worry that my colleague Matt Ehret was a communist simply because he was always talking about Hamilton. I've made my peace with Matt. It's fine. I told him I understand, and in the past I used to call Matt a communist, and I don't anymore. And I apologize to him on air about this. Matt's a good guy. We disagree on some things, and it's perfectly reasonable as men and as men who respect each other. But I do believe that the Hamiltonian system is the perfect countermove to a world subsumed by this central bank policy of debt and technocracy. This is, I think, the issue. I also don't know that it's going to be a permanently great system. It should be a transition state from where we were to where we need to be to defend ourselves to then move on to something else. I think the best argument for that, or the best example of that potential argument is Vladimir Putin's Russia, right? And he's unfortunately had to run basically a hybrid economy with an IMF-trained, central banker, Elvira Nabiullina, constantly undermining what he's been doing at the fiscal and political level. And then
what is Russia been doing at the fiscal level?
I mean, they basically have been running Hamilton's system of having strong government in ownership and public-private partnerships to build the strategic industries up. That's what Putin did. He took back, control of certain very important state enterprises like Yukos, for example, and then obviously still held on to Gazprom and controlling shares in Gazprom, Rosneft, and all these other ones. And eventually, the goal was to, and you could see it. The goal was to eventually more fully privatize and have the government take less and less of a stake as they went along. Built the sovereign wealth fund in order to be able to generate income off of that, in order to keep taxes low, which they've done. They have a flat 13% income tax in Russia. Many things that they've done are very similar to a kind of, Hamiltonian style system. I would argue that Xi has done the same thing in China, right? Not again, it's going to have its excesses, and there's going to be criticisms of it a generation or two into the process. And at some point, yeah, would we be better off with an Austrian system? Yeah, but only if the rest of the world is now operating under a Hamiltonian system, and then we can start, and everybody's building high trust societies with strong borders and strong, and strong cultures and everything else, and then we can have, the kind of open market, quote unquote free trade.
And I think that's the disconnect, right? With libertarians, they want to go right to the Austrian system from where we are today.
They want to go from point A to point Z, and they just ignore all that stuff in the middle. It's like that. It's like Otto from A Fish Called Wanda. What was that middle thing? It's like I had a professor in college. My undergraduate advisor in the UF chemistry department was a guy so smart, right? As an undergraduate, he used to take physics tests by writing the answer down. Graduate level physics exams, you just write the answer down. And when the professors were like, well, what about the 15 intermediate steps to get you? He's like, why? The answer was trivial.
Wow.
You go there. That guy. He was one of those people, like the kind of people that, the kind of person that that's when you realize, okay, you think you're smart, and then there's that guy. Okay. Drunk off his ass with the purple porpoise, the guy could design, experiments that, would get him, multiple millions of dollars from foundational grants from the NSF, like, on the back cocktail napkins while drinking a double whiskey. It was insane. But being in that environment, like I realized, like, I remember that was the kind of environment I was in as an undergraduate. And I realized, like, there's layers to that, there's layers to intelligence in that respect, but I wouldn't want that guy in charge of my government. Right. Like I wouldn't. I love that guy. He's brilliant and he's lovely, and he eventually became the department chair and everything else. And he did great things in the UF chemistry department over the last 40 years. But I don't want him running my government. I don't want him, because he's not thinking holistically. He's got his thing that he's good at. And libertarians, in many ways, are kind of single issue voters in that respect. And it becomes a very simple flow chart of, does it do this? No, then it's bad. And I remember ages ago reading an article from David Boaz, of all people, when I first became a libertarian. Right, I was falling down that rabbit hole. He wrote a great article ages ago. You can look it up. Don't become a knee-jerk libertarian, where you just knee-jerk react to whatever happens as, oh, that's bad. Like, get good at parsing their horrible language. Get good at understanding where they're running the operation on you, right?
Learn how to steel man their argument so you understand it. Yeah.
Or just learn how to read their political language as, code. I did all that, and then level up. And then that's not the end. That's the beginning of the process. Right. And for me, and that's where we've been. That's where I've gone over the last. This is a 25-year journey now for me. And again, in my heart of hearts, am I still kind of a narco libertarian jackass? Sure. Do I want to like trade goldbacks and buy? Do I want to? Yeah, of course I do. I think they're cool, and but at the other side of it, this is the real world we live in. And the real world we live in is that the US dollar is not going anywhere. If anything, the US dollar is going to use its market share to, it can either be used for good or for evil. It can be used for a mix of both. By the way, I know this is a really hard concept for a lot of libertarians to get their heads around it. Things can be both good and bad at the same time. And I know this is hard. Like
nuance.
There's more, nuance, moral, gray morality, and a variety of other things. As long as we're moving in the right direction, we should be happy. So we got a non-Keynesian over at the Fed who's got a big job ahead of him to change the culture of the Fed. For all of, and this is where I would say that for all of the things that Powell did right, at the end of the day, do I think Powell's a Keynesian, or do I think he's still steeped in that whole worldview? Probably. Is that his tragic flaw as a person? Why he can't be the hero? Probably. If he's now talking like heroic narrative stuff, great. Donald Trump's got a whole lot of tragic flaws. We should talk about them. We shouldn't cartoonify them. And we should try and help him accentuate his gifts and minimize its flaws. That's our job as political commentators. That's our job as voters. And I don't see people doing that. What I see is a whole bunch of people grifting off of the black pill because it gets clicks. I'm like, that's pathetic.
Yeah.
Like that's not building the better world you say you want. Because all you're doing now is now you're just being a useful idiot and a water carrier for the most evil people on the planet. Because they're running every psychological operation on you imaginable, and you're falling for them.
So let's dig into some of that, the psychological operations, the black pilling that I see every day online. I mean, if I just scroll through my X, I'll see 10 posts that say that Israel controls Trump and he's Trump's bought and paid for. So what's really happening here? Let's kind of dig into your view. I guess start with to kind of center it on Iran. So what actually do you think? What is the goal of the Trump administration going into Iran from a financial standpoint, from a control standpoint, a power standpoint? What's happening? Layers deep.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say to the people in the audience who think that Israel runs the world, you're wrong. But I need you to really sit with that for a minute and just put it aside. Okay, I want you to know, and it's going to be hard because it's just like for all the people with Ukrainian flags still in their Twitter bios, I need you to understand that Russia's not the devil. There's nuance in the world, folks, okay? Now, Donald Trump goes into Iran with a variety of stated goals, and not the least of which is the most often repeated: Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. Now, why? Why is this important? Well, aside from the fact that nuclear weapons are immoral, which they are, because they target civilians.
Yeah.
They're fundamentally immoral, right? Now, so let's start from that perspective. The first thing that Trump is saying is I have a moral stance here. Nuclear weapons are bad. And the world's and a country that has been at war, declared war with the United States since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, shouldn't have one. As U.S. president, these are facts, okay? These are not opinions. This is not Israeli propaganda. This is something I had to, Iran's the victim. I did this for years. I did. I'm not going to lie to you and and I was always on. For years, I was like, yeah, I understand Iran's plan. I get it. I was in that whole mindset. Our foreign policy is evil. It still is to some respect, but it's improving. So you have that. You also, by extension, if you think that Trump went into Iran and didn't realize that Iran was going to try the IRGC, is going to try and shut down the Strait of Hormuz and use that as their leverage point over us, well, then you're an idiot, because anybody, Donald Trump is many things. He's not an idiot. Okay. So he knew what they were going to do. And they attempted because they told us for 47 years, this is what they were going to do. You will all do what we tell you to do, and Obama and everybody else let them do it and help build it and gave them pallets of cash to build the axis of resistance around the world and all the rest of the stuff. If you want to just take the argument that America is evil and irredeemable, great. Well, one, you should move to fucking Costa Rica or some other place or whatever. I don't give a shit. And two, get the fuck out. If you hate America so much, get out.
Seriously, yeah.
Seriously, get out. Yeah. Why are you staying? What is this, an abusive relationship? No, it's a certain point when you're married to an abusive narcissist, you're supposed to leave.
Yeah, and we had plenty of people for the World Cup just come to America. I see videos every day saying how blown away they are about how awesome America is.
How wonderful America and Americans are.
Yeah,
that's another thing that's interesting, right? So you have all these stated goals, right? But let's back up and we all know what they were. And he said, look, rise up and let's overthrow, let's get rid of these terrible mullahs. They're horrible people. The IRGC, let's get rid of them. They're horrible people. And okay, and let's bring Iran out of the conflict with the rest of the world. How about we do that? his stated goals, because those are easy political wins in his mind. These are 80-20 or 90-10 issues. Like, Americans don't want Iran having a nuclear weapon. Are Americans happy with Pakistan having a nuclear weapon? No. Israel having nuclear weapons? No. But those are facts now that we have to work on those things later. We can work on this one. We can stop this thing. That's one, right? Two, the sum total of all those things is Trump also has an energy dominance policy. He also is trying to reorganize and reorient global power away from the old world of Europe, the Middle East, and Africa towards North and South America. This is very important. You have to take everything he's doing into context and realize that Iran is one small piece of it, right? Now, how are you going to do that? Well, you got to deprecate the Strait of Hormuz as a single point of failure for the global economy. How do you do that? Well, you get rid of the people who are turning it into a choke point for the global economy. Then you got to ask yourself the question, who helped them create that? Because Iran didn't do that by themselves. Oh, that begs like 14 or 15 other questions, and we could be here for the next 14 hours going through all this. I'm leaving some of this story out for you to answer those questions, you and the audience, to answer these questions and answer them honestly. Because but I'll give you the TLDR, folks. Trump was well aware of the hardliners in Israel, the hardliners in Iran, the hardliners in London, and the hardliners in Washington, D.C., and they all wanted the conflict. They all wanted this conflict, this potential conflict, to stay the status quo, because they make money off the status quo. They make money off of the dialing up or down the volatility and the price of oil and the threat to the global economy, and they get to use it as blackmail against the entire world. And the ultimate piece of blackmail is putting that regime in charge of a nuclear weapon capable with a throw weight that could throw that weapon all the way from the Straits of Gibraltar to the Straits of Malacca. And now all the geographic choke points of the world, absent the Panama Canal, the Bering Strait, and the two capes, the Cape of Good Hope and the Cape of and Cape Horn, like off the table. And Straits of Florida, but that's not really as big a choke point. I mean, the Straits of Florida are real. That's why the communists are in Cuba, by the way. Come on, let's not kid ourselves, right?
For now.
You're right. I agree. But I'm just saying, like, you have to reorient and look at the globe as a different thing, right? Like, Halford Mackinder's the geopolitical pivot of history. It's a very important and very famous piece of British propaganda or foreign policy, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty freaking stupid, ultimately, at the end of the day, because Britain was a maritime empire, right? And it's talking about the heartland and all this other stuff. But if you just realize that as a thing, the British / Anglo-Dutch, all of them understood very clearly that the geographic choke points to maritime trade is the key to controlling the flow of global trade, and therefore the control that gives them. If you control that, then you can control the plumbing of the financial system built up to make sure that global trade keeps happening. See, now we're getting away from Iran. Now we're getting into the geographic choke points, and we're getting into global trade. Now we're getting into what funds and fuels global trade and what the plumbing. And now we're getting into the system. And that's why I keep going back all the way up to London. Because again, what I said originally is that London is the metaphor for the financial architecture of the world that we have all been living within. This is where, and I've been saying this for years, and I will continue to say it, this is why I slowly but surely went away from just being a gold bug in an Austrian to trying to understand global capital flow. Starting with Martin Armstrong when he was still in jail, and all of that. So for 20 years, I've been looking at the world and more and more realizing that you can't analyze gold or money or this without understanding geopolitics, because it's all interconnected. So once you start seeing the world from that perspective, you can't stop that inquisition until you get to the end.
Right.
And it's taken me most of my friggin' adult life to figure this stuff out. And it's been painful, and it's been slow, and I've done it in real time. I've done it in public practically for the last 10 years. as I've tried to go through bit by bit by bit and learn and understand it. And for me, the big one was the following. We all know that Israel is a creation of London, Balfour Declaration, Sykes-Picot, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? Well, on the other side, we also know that the British were deeply invested in Iran, going back to the formation of NIOC and British Petroleum and blah, blah, and all that stuff. So, and, I know my good friend Alex Brainerd disagrees with me with the IRG, but there's deep financial ties between the IRGC and London. I just don't agree anymore. I'm like, no, it's very obvious, because last year during the 12-day war, it hit me in a flash, literally while I was on a podcast with Alex. I said, no, Iran's search for a nuclear weapon is the forever war. Yes, you're right. They don't want a nuclear weapon. They want to threaten us with always getting one, because forever and a day, as long as they don't have one, then they can continue to command everybody's attention as they inch closer to it, and then use that as a means by which to get concessions out of the world that they haven't earned. And they can continue to create the political volatility and the political blackmail and to freeze politicians in place and to run cover for all these terrible people that are running guns and drugs and children and women around the world. No, that's what they're doing. Right? And it just creates this, that's the forever war. And I'm like, no, the forever war, this ends with, no, they don't get to have one of those. Now what? Oh, so now what are you going to do? Now you got to so let's look at it that way. So now you're Trump.
Just to go off of that for a second. So, and also just to bring Israel back into it, Israel but I shouldn't say Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu and his very much want that status quo in place
of course.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Well, Netanyahu was created by the British. The whole Likudnik part of the Zionist project, it was created by, remember, Christian Zionism predates Jewish Zionism, by the way. And it happened, and guess what? That was also a British problem. All these extremisms, libertarianism, wokeism, communism, all of this stuff. It's all reflection of the same. It's all a same kind of, again, go back to Ian McGilchrist and all that. It's all, how do we turn the left brain? How do we turn a person into a disembodied left brain, destroy their ability to assess different threats, keep them focused on remember, in the brain chemistry situation, the right brain is the threat identifier. Right. The left brain is the targeting reticle. You use your left brain to aim the gun. The right brain decides what you're going to shoot at.
Right.
Right. I picked my target. My target is that deer over there. The left brain then, uses, puts the thing on target and reminds yourself, okay, I got to breathe and I got to squeeze the trigger, not pull, all that stuff. That's the left brain. Right. Well, the left brain is also capable of dominating the right brain because the right brain doesn't speak. Okay. So it's easy to get people easily, and then it gets even better. Libertarians have a high correlation with logic and Asperger and autism, which is all another form of left brain possession. Because physiologically, we have that problem. So I'm not saying all autists are dyed in the wool friggin' commies on one side or libertarians. That's all I'm saying. But you will get a higher concentration of them in that type of person.
Yeah.
And that kind of crash out on either side when they get discordant information just triggers them because it doesn't fit their mental map. Now, you give them a data point which collapses their old worldview that they can't argue with. Bing. All of a sudden, it's like the seventh act of an episode of House. Oh my God, it wasn't sarcoidosis, it was this. And then, he figures out what it is. That's the whole kind of Sherlock Holmes model, but you have to still be open to this idea. And everything that we're living through in this moment in time with social media and the rest of it is designed, and this thing is designed to keep you focused on all the wrong things.
Right.
And then the psychological operations are just keep you there, feed you that which you already want to hear. The algorithm doesn't program you program the algorithm. You're not a slave to the algorithm. You're not a slave to the algorithm is a slave to you. And that is when you finally make that leap, that's when that's when you can really start to break out of these traps.
The algorithm is only helping you create your own prison. Right?
Your focus determines your reality. It's a terrible movie, but it's the 5 most important words ever spoken by anybody in a movie ever, which is the Phantom Menace. First lesson that Qui-Gon Jinn gives to Anakin Skywalker. Your focus determines your reality.
Yeah.
And we as libertarians have focused on the end goal, which is the point of all the rhetoric. And so when you watch the people who come into your life, the trusted, the people who are now feeding you the new information. And again, I am not specifically calling out people like Tom Woods or anybody. I'm actually not talking about them at all. I'm actually talking about all the ones that are adjacent to that. Like I've been reviewing my own life, right? And going back over it and asking myself a simple question. And I was having this conversation with a friend of mine last night. I said, I don't know if you ever listened to, in the early days before we called them podcasts, I used to listen to all of them, like King World News and Jim Papa's Financial News Hour, and this one. That's all I did. Like when I was still a research chemist and I was still, a new bot. I'm still just like toiling away. It's like everybody else doing their job every day. And I would have this stuff on the background, especially during the 2008 financial crisis, and the years after that. So from 2008 through 2011, until that job actually died, and then I had to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. But I remember, I think back to King World News, and I think about all those people that Eric King introduced the world to. And I'm like, first place I ever heard Nigel Farage. First place I ever heard people like, I also heard Jim Sinclair and Rick Rule and others and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, Catherine Austin Fitz, variety of people. And now I look at them all and I don't, and nothing has changed. They're still saying the same stupid shit that they said 20 years ago. And I'm like, it was a good grift then. It's not a good grift today. I just don't buy it anymore. I have to wonder if everybody that has been paraded in front of me to point me in a particular different direction into the arms of the group that they, and then you watch I look at everybody surrounding the nieces and I'm like, well, they were just innocently, being the gatherers of this worldview.
Yeah, I mean,
then all you have to do is turn the squelch off and let them rise, and then all of a sudden, look, we're powerful because they let us talk to each other now, and see, everybody loves us now. No, it doesn't really work that way. I mean, again, a mix of the zeitgeist, the people thirsty for new information, and then they get pushed into a particular rabbit hole. Like, again, I've never interacted with Dave Smith, but I've watched him, and I'm like, dude, I remember talking like that when it was in 2002. Like by 2004, I was like a different guy. Like he's still the same guy he was 9 years ago. I'm like, that's an operation. That to me just screams operation.
I like Dave Smith. I've had him on this show. I've met him in person. So I mean, it's tricky with this stuff because I can look at myself too. So we've started this podcast back in 2015 somewhere. No, 2012, 2013, I think. And it's not just me. There's other co-hosts and
sure.
our original co-founder Mark Claire. He moved on and he became frustrated.
Is the same Mark Claire that works with Mikhail Thorup?
Yeah.
I know Mark.
Yeah, Mark's a great guy.
He is.
Good friend.
Guy.
Good friend.
Yes.
But yeah, he became frustrated with libertarianism before any of us did. Within the lines of liberty and moved on. But yeah, for a long time we were doing the same thing. We thought we were doing the right thing. So when I look at people like Dave Smith and and Tom Woods. And I mean, I'm not going to say that anyone is acting nefariously. I'm not
Mhm.
saying that there couldn't be nefarious actors
Sure.
within the movement, and there couldn't
Yes.
be intelligence assets within the movement. I think it'd be
There are.
dumb to think that there aren't. There probably are. It's somewhere,
Yes.
but
Yep. No, I mean, I'll be honest with you. John, it's been really the last 6 months have been very clarifying for me in a variety of ways. Um, because since Trump decided to poke the Iran button, right?
Mhm.
The Venezuela was bad enough. Like these people were like crashing out over Maduro. I'm like, really? Like this is like like here we are today after the the earthquake devastates Caracas, and we find out just how bad things really are
Mhm.
because what think about it, right? Like they built houses out of cardboard and styrofoam, and the whole thing just collapsed, and the whole city collapses. Tens of thousands of people missing, and it's horrific. It's horrific.
Yeah.
And it's everything. And yet there was Rand Paul out there screaming about how this is an act of war. Fuck off, dude. Like this is when you're supposed to actually stand up and go, no, this is what needs to be done. These are non-stated. This is the biggest problem I think that libertarians are having with the entire process, which is that everything government is bad and everything non-government is by then definition good,
Yeah.
or at the very least, not objectionable. Like any private solution to a problem is fundamentally good. So that's okay. So that means that the mob and organized crime, especially, and is good thing. Well, what if that mob, and you can't trace it because of British banking secrecy laws, which are massive, by the way, you can't prove directly that they have a state actor behind them. Like, do you think that's better than, in a situation where states are
Mhm.
actually at this moment in time subordinate to the supranational organizations that are literally moving money around?
Yeah.
And, I'm sorry, but at a certain point, this is where the edge cases of where libertarianism fails, when you say, okay, no, as a government, we're putting an end to this because we've decided we want to be a country, meaning we want to be a family, meaning we want to be a community. Now, again, I know this is hard for people to understand. I'm still an individualist at heart, fundamentally. My name is Tom. I'm a member of the Luongo family. I have, I live in Florida, or I've lived in Florida for a long time. I've lived in my town in Florida, in the state of Florida, in the country of the United States, on the planet Earth, on the continent of North America, on planet Earth. That my
Mhm.
psychological makeup starts here and moves upward. That does not
Mhm.
mean that all of those things have to be mutually exclusive to one another, right?
Mhm.
So, as an American operating in a world where we have the European Union, China, the remnants of the British Empire, the Mexican cartels, blah, blah. And then you find out that all these things are they're all part of the same frigging organization at some level. Yeah, they're all
Yeah.
just different verticals within the same mega corporation. You're like, no, I'm sorry. I'm okay with Donald Trump going out and blowing up some friggin' speedboats, like international waters. Aside from the fact that blowing up speedboats in international drug boats in international waters is not an act of war because it's in international waters. Like, sorry, it is. Like, we dealt with the Barbary pirates that way, and you guys were okay with it then. Like, we can't deal with it now. I mean, like, it's just nonsense. Like,
Mhm.
this is one of those moments where everybody starts to show either who they work for, what they actually believe in, or who they're being blackmailed by. You take your pick. I find Rand actually really interesting because all of a sudden he's now on board with a lot of the things that Trump is doing, foreign policy wise. Now that this worked out, I remember us complaining about Rand Paul when he wasn't a doctrinaire when he wasn't doctrinaire critic of foreign policy when he first became senator. I remember those days.
Well,
I
I think
remember
I
when
think Rand saw what happened to Thomas Massie, and he doesn't want the same result.
Well, that's one. The second thing I would say is that maybe, just maybe, Rand Paul was beaten to death by was nearly beaten to death. Like same thing
Yeah.
with Amy Coney Barrett. They threatened their children. Like John Roberts, I get, like with the whole birthright citizenship, the anchor baby decision. Like John Roberts, I get. He was placed on the court after they killed Antonin Scalia to destroy the country when necessary. But Amy Coney Barrett, like, I'm not trying to absolve her of any of what she did or what she didn't do. But at the end of the day, she's a mom of 7. Now,
so why did Trump put her on the Supreme Court?
Because he didn't have any other options. Because again, at the end of the day, Mitch McConnell was going to determine who was and who wasn't going to get on the Supreme Court. And so, I famously had a lot of, dust-ups with Robert Barnes on Twitter. But, I remember when Barnes said Barrett's going to be a problem. All these Federal Society judges are a problem. I'll give Barnes props. He was right. But, what are you going to do? Like, that happened during Trump's first term when he was in control of nothing. I mean, for Christ's sake, he had John Bolton as his national security advisor.
That was ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but was it, at a certain point, you're like, I got lemons. I got to make the best tasting lemonade I've got, and I don't have a whole lot of sugar. Right? I mean, that's the first Trump administration. So the best he could do is under siege. I mean, the first Trump administration was screwed from the moment he appointed Michael Flynn.
Yeah, well, Trump. I don't think Trump thought he was going to win.
No, I know Trump didn't think he was going to win. No, it was clearly obvious he didn't think he was going to win. So, we did our best with what we had to work with. He got up there. The most important quote from all of Trump's first administration was, "I knew it was bad up here. I didn't know it was this bad." I do a terrible Trump impersonation. I do terrible impersonations, period. That's to me is still like the most operative thing for me. That line just defines Trump 1.0, first season of the Trump show. So what does he do after that? He does everything he can to expose and poke as many shibboleths as possible to expose as many people as possible and force them using what he had. And Trump didn't even understand the powers of the presidency when he became president. Okay? Like, I remember sitting and chatting with Dexter White about this the whole time. Where in early days, getting gold, guts, and guns off the ground, he's like, do you realize that the guy doesn't even understand how the presidency works? Because if he did, he would be doing this, and this. And this shit would end. I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, clearly with Trump 2.0, he's come in with a much different agenda. And with a much higher quality crew around him. It's not perfect. There's still a lot of people in the administration operating against him. And why can't we just show a little faith or a little trust? And I know we all are beaten down, and I know that libertarianism is literally oppositional defiance disorder codified as a political philosophy. That's its biggest problem. That's why you never win an election. That way. Because people want to get shit done. Because critics don't, because no one ever built a statue to a critic. In Hollywood, they're never going to build a statue to Roger Ebert.
Yeah, because critics don't provide solutions.
No, that's not their job.
Yeah.
Right? So Trump, for all of his faults, and they are legion, and I'm happy. This is one of the things, like, I have to constantly go back over the primitives. I'd rather talk about what Trump's foibles. But we're not even there yet. They've got us so bound down in this bullshit about Israel and this and everything else. Like, the truth of the matter is that you want the TLDR on Iran, the Brits were on both sides. They controlled the entire Persian Gulf. Qatar, LNG pumping terminal masquerading as a country. UAE, a money laundering operation masquerading as a country. Oman, an series of MI6 listening posts on the Straits of Hormuz, masquerading as a country. Do I have to make it any more obvious to you than that? And guess what? They were all created after World War II in order to control the Persian Gulf. And then the goal was always to put Iran there, and then Iraq, and all the rest of it, and then have all that, and then build Israel up into this big boogeyman, and just feed everybody all this anti-Semitic bullshit. And all day long, when, as Ian Burlingame likes to point out, the only reason you know the name Rothschilds is because they're the name on all the trusts. The Rothschilds were just the bankers or just the lawyers of the real families, real powerful families of Europe. But you can't look into you can't look into that because because who owns the trust is bound behind. They're the registered agents. That's all they are.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say that they haven't then leveraged that up into other things. I'm not saying that the Rothschilds are good, bad, or indifferent. Like, I think they're terrible people. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they haven't done their own shit on their own. Like, of course. But remember, like, I remember Martin Armstrong years ago saying, look, like, Rothschilds are 19th century stuff. The problem in front of you is the Goldman Sachs of the world. This is what he was saying in 2010. He wasn't wrong. And I would also go over and look at Barclays and Standard Chartered and, the Bank of England and all the as Blaine Holt reminded us the other day, there's 400,000 banks and, some in St. Bart. Like every guy walking around St. Bart, there's more banks in St. Bart than there are people. And same thing with the Caymans. This is all loopholes within British financial law, offshore financial law, that then protects all these companies. And, and we've got CIA carve-outs down there. We've got MI6 carve-outs down there. You've got Mossad carve-outs. You've got FSB carve-outs. You've got Chinese intelligence. I mean, it's all a mess, but it's all enabled by this old system. And so now I have something for you. I was thinking about this the other day. I said, Bitcoin. Everybody, all the critics of Bitcoin. I was at a Bitcoin conference in New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago, and I brought this one up to them. I said, you've heard all the standard arguments against Bitcoin, and they're all kind of dumb, right? It's not really gold. What happens if the grid goes out? Blah blah blah, all this stuff.
Jeffrey Epstein invented it.
Epstein invented. That's like the most hilarious thing imaginable. Like, how about this one? The big one is, of course, was created by DARPA. Now, we as libertarians, or in my case, former libertarians, take that and throw it aside. I've been able to take that argument and throw it out the window and call bullshit on it for years. Well, it was created, or at least SHA-256 was created, which is the encryption algorithm, right? Which is what the entire internet runs on. Right? So if Bitcoin's insecure and DARPA has the backdoor into SHA-256, and they've got the backdoor into the entire internet, so at this point, if they were really under threat by us, why would the whole world be running on SHA-256? And then it just becomes this conspiracy that nobody can justify. How about the other side of it? What if it was actually created by DARPA in order to create a digital money that would then one day challenge the whole old British offshore dollar system by creating a digital version of gold that they can't hack? What if, again, the best lies, again, I'm just throwing an idea out there for you to chew on. Okay. This is what I do. I don't do it to try and muddy the waters. What I'm doing is literally trying to remind people this is how you need to think about everything you hear. Because the best lies always have a kernel of truth in them. DARPA created Bitcoin. Maybe that's true. But for what purpose? We as conspiratorially minded and cynical, oppositionally defiant libertarians who think that we're the most wise and insouciant and smartest people on the planet, and we're in opposition to these people. So therefore, and we've embraced Bitcoin. What it was given to these people to champion, to build up for this moment in time, in order for it to become a foundational part of the new economic system that Trump and company are trying to build. That, by the way, is self-consistent with my analysis that it was Wall Street standing behind Jerome Powell during the Biden administration to get SOFR across the line so that we can get control over the pricing of US dollars globally. And then Besson comes in and starts hitting the LBM, and Besson and the Chinese together start hitting the LBMA between the eyes on gold and silver. And then Trump turns around and goes, oh yeah, Act 3 is we take the pricing of the marginal barrel of oil away from OPEC. And City of London. And we take their shipping insurance, and we take this, and we take all of those cash flow, all that passive income, all that cash flow, those cash flow streams, we take them away. This is getting back to why did Trump go to Iran? For all of these reasons. everything I just said for the last half an hour is part of that story. And Bitcoin serves a part of that story. Like the more I look at this is the way my brain thinks at this point. Because nothing else makes any sense, Sean. Literally nothing else makes any sense. Yeah, okay, maybe it's just that Trump is a grifter that wants a lot of money. Like, really? Okay. Really? That's the world you want to live in?
Well, Trump wants to be remembered. I mean, I don't think people can dispute that. So Trump wants to leave his mark on history. So why wouldn't he want to do something historically significant like that?
Right.
That's not to say it's his idea, you know.
Sorry about that.
We must be too close to the target. That's
no. I had a spam call come in and it routed to my iPad.
Okay.
I forgot to stop it before it took over my iPad.
I just got like 5 minutes left, and I want to be I want to honor your time as well. So let's put a bow on this. At least for now.
The bow is that yes, of course Donald Trump wants to be remembered for doing something historic. Of course he does. That's like, but you have to be that guy. You have to have that kind of streak, that kind of ego, or that kind of self-possession or whatever. Like in order to be able to handle the outrageous slings and arrows that have been shunted your way, like you have to be made of a certain kind of stuff in order to get that done. And there are men like that in history, and maybe he'll be one of them. Maybe. I hope he is. I'd like for him to be. Because I think he's going to leave the world in the beginnings of a state that will be better than the one that he left. This is a big problem. And it's a process. And you're trying to root out hundreds of years of infrastructure. The last point I want to leave you with is the following. A lot of people are, every time Iran did anything to defend, anything positive in this quote unquote war, blow up a base, send off a missile, shoot down a ship or whatever. Whatever Trump is trying to do in Iran, whatever he achieves has to be such that when he leaves, the rebuilding of the old status quo before he went in there has to be too expensive to rebuild. This is that Ian Berling game. If you want to avoid World War III, you got to destroy all the assets that were built up to fight World War III.
Yeah.
Well, in some ways, Trump wants out of the Middle East. It's very obvious. Israel is literally saying we want to stand on our own. The Gulf states are saying the same thing. There's a lot. It's all in flux. And if Trump loses this fight, he still has to leave the world in such a way that Kamala Harris or whoever comes in 2029 and can't easily rebuild it. And so you start the drawdowns of troops. Like there's no troops left in Latvia. He took them all out. So what does London do? They start this idea that Putin's going to invade the Baltics. Because Putin, the evil mastermind, is going to move into the power vacuum. You see how this works? So Trump is just removing our troops from Latvia, and then he's also removing troops from Germany. He's allowed the Iranians, probably allowed them to blow up a bunch of our stuff to give him the reason to leave. He's, telling the Kurds, move across the border into northern Iran, start taking out the IRGC guys there. Like
that is an interesting take there on Trump allowing some of our bases to be blown up. Because I've heard from people in the military that it was like we weren't totally prepared for what happened, what came from Iran, which that would be surprising.
Right. And they like the guys weren't there. Like there's a variety of, I'm not saying that Iran didn't get some assets. They did. But maybe if those assets are no longer there and we don't need them at home, we're not going to, we can't move the radar installations back and put them in Kansas. They have to be, that's not possible. So this whole idea that and you don't want to leave it behind for somebody else to capture.
Yeah.
Why were the M1 Abrams supporting, movements in the Green Zone in Baghdad last week? And apparently, something like 50 or 60 IRGC guys were rooted out in the buildings next to the embassy that they already knew where they were. Why is Putin now taking the gloves off and hitting certain places in Kiev that he hasn't hit before? Again, you want to try and do this and kill as few. I don't want to use the word innocent. I want to use the word non-combatants or whatever is possible. You want to leave as much infrastructure and as much institutional infrastructure as possible in order for there to be you can't leave a massive power vacuum, right? Because then Iran turns into a fail state, the neocons win, and the MI6 and everybody just runs in there and starts doing their terrible, nefarious shit. That's what we saw in Iraq. That's what we've seen in Syria. That's what we've seen in all the other places. They want that for Iran. Well, Trump is trying to get out from underneath that. And literally, he's trying to run the Venezuela model, which is, hey, let's get rid of Maduro. Let's work with Delcy Rodriguez. Let's start rebuilding the country. And it was working. And then, a natural disaster hit. So what a shock that for Trump's energy dominance policy, which is to get the heavy sour out of Venezuela and back into the Gulf refineries, to help bring the cost of diesel fuel and fertilizer and everything else down, we have this terrible thing happen. Of course, he's going to turn around and say, we need to put as many people on the ground as possible into Venezuela, because Venezuela is a key part of our strategy. So, for example, watch the oil commentators over the next few weeks. They're already out there in force today saying, we have a problem with diesel fuel and JP4 and all this other stuff because, and then, we can go through it like chapter and verse. The reality is that it's probably, the reason that gasoline is sitting at $2.95 a gallon on the contract, on the August contract, is because of what just happened in Venezuela. More than it should be dropping in the 270s, 260s. The forward curve on gasoline has it back into like 225, 230 a gallon by the election, by the way. Another 75, 80 cents a gallon off the price. So, but again, there's many things that can be done here. And all these things that have happened also create a lot of political cover for Trump to go, hey, we need more refineries. We need more pipelines. We need more of this. We need more of that. And like all of a sudden you can go, yeah, hey, why don't we build those things? Why don't we build new nuclear plants? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do all of these things? And so just, people like to simplify things and say any kind of strategic thinking is, they immediately want to go to the 21st century of conspiracy theory. It's 47D chess. Well, no, it's just second and third order effects. And people are actually thinking about the second and third order effects. And why is that bad?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's because you just don't want to win. You just want to be right. I want to win. I don't give a fuck about being right.
I love it.
So,
certainly a different type of thinking than we hear in libertarian circles. And as always, Tom, I'm used to listening to you on your podcast and on Rich Does Politics. So been a pleasure getting to talk with you one-on-one here. Really appreciate the time you gave my audience.
Of course.
Let everybody know where they can follow your work and find everything you do.
Sure. Well, you can go to tomluongo.me. I post whatever I produce anymore. I do try and remember to post there. You can go to my Twitter handle at TFL1728 on Twitter. And then, of course, Patreon/Gold Ghosts and Guns. You can just sign up to follow, or you can sign up for the market reports, which come out every Wednesday and every Sunday, where I tie all of this stuff directly into the technical analysis on the important financial markets, including like bond spreads, gold and silver and Bitcoin and all that stuff. Dow theory on the equity markets, and then obviously the monthly newsletter, which is where we make our make our bones. Where we have a full portfolio strategy, and this is where Dexter and I take our look ahead as to where we're going. And I'll put our track record up against anybody's. I think it's been pretty good. So,
all right, good stuff. Thanks for coming on the show, Tom. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, John. Thank you again.
All right, that is a wrap for today's show. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully, it made you think, took you out of your comfort zone a little bit. If you haven't been thinking about some of these things already, I just hope it makes you think, guys. Not trying to change your mind, tell you you're wrong, tell you that you need to listen to everything Tom says. I just want you to think for yourself. Look at some of the things, the dogmatic things, maybe you've been following for years and start to maybe re-examine them, revisit them. All right. Okay. So if you like this show, please be sure you're subscribed. Please consider getting more involved with us and finding us on Patreon or on Locals to become a member of our Poliprix group there, a supporting member. And yeah, that's it. I appreciate you watching. Appreciate Tom coming on the show, and I will see you all next week. In the meantime, keep moving.